Hey, third graders, it's Mr. Foreman. I hope you're doing well. For today's literacy lesson, we're going to start talking about a new literary genre, well, new to us, called fairy tales. A lot of you have read a lot of fairy tales before. We're going to talk about them a little bit more in depth, talk about what's common and elements of all of them, and we're going to try doing some reading some fairy tales over the next couple of days. So let's get started. So, for our fairy tales unit, our learning target is that you can identify the important parts of a fairy tale and that you can listen to a read aloud and think critically. Pretty easy today. Moving on. Fairy tale, let me close this so you can see me. A fairy tale, as you may know, is a kind of a folk tale that is hundreds of years old. Fairy tales like you've heard them before, like the Little Red Riding Hood and the Three Little Pigs, and if they happened at all, they happened a long time ago. Fairies do appear sometimes as characters, but you're more likely to find a hero or a heroine with a problem to solve, events that cannot happen in real life, and very often there's a happy ending. We're going to watch a short video about fairy tales, and I want you to watch for the elements of a fairy tale in this video.
Today we will take a look at the genre of fairy tales. What makes a fairy tale different from other types of stories? What do fairy tales have in common? From all parts of the world, fairy tales have the same themes and motifs. Some were created by unknown authors long ago before people could read or write. Others were collected and adapted like the ones by the brothers Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, who gave us Rapunzel, Little Red Riding Hood, Hansel and Gretel. Or Francis Charles Perrault, who gave us Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella. Or Denmark's Hans Christian Andersen, who wrote his own stories such as The Ugly Duckling, The Snow Queen, and The Little Mermaid. But what do all fairy tales have in common? Let us begin with the setting. Fairy tales take place in an undefined time and place. They begin with phrases like once upon a time or a long, long time ago. They take place in a kingdom far away in a forest or wood or sometimes a humble cottage. And how about the characters? Well, fairy tale characters share commonalities. The archetypal damsel in distress needs to be rescued by a heroic knight in shining armor or a valiant prince. There are good characters too. They usually have magic powers and they help the main character. But then there are evil characters who set out to hurt the good characters. But don't worry, those lose out in the end. Another feature of the fairy tale is the recurring pattern. These patterns usually come in sets of 3s or 7s. There are also overarching themes: poverty versus wealth, cleverness versus foolishness, and good versus evil. There are also underlying elements such as sexism, transformation, justice, humility, and wit. And of course, fairy tales teach us lessons and morals. Those lessons and morals unite us in our common culture. So why do we love fairy tales? Because they remind us of us. Albert Einstein said, if you want your children to be intelligent, read them fairy tales. If you want them to be more intelligent, read them more fairy tales. And in fairy tales, they lived happily ever after, but not always.
Awesome. Let's pick back up where we were. Let's keep moving on here. Hey, guys. So, as you saw in that story, most fairy tales have a lot of common elements. And if you've read some fairy tales or had them read to you, you probably know this. Most of them have a setting, which is where the story takes place, in an undefined time and place. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away is how the very Star Wars stories always start out, which are science fiction, but are also kind of fairy tales. They often have a hero or a heroine, which is a boy hero or a girl heroine, who has a problem to solve. They often have fairies or other make-believe characters that appear, like in The Wizard of Oz, there's a wicked witch, there's a good witch. In Cinderella, there's a fairy as well. There's lots of fairies in fairy tales. There's often elements of magic or magical creatures, as in the story that we're going to read in a little bit. There's usually events that happen that cannot happen in real life. The story of the three little pigs and the wolf coming and blowing the houses down, that would never happen in real life. There's usually a happy ending in a story like most fairy tales. And there's typically a theme or a lesson to the story. I don't know if you can read all that. There's a theme or a lesson, something that you need to learn about life or about people. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to finish up today's lesson. I'm going to do a read aloud. Oh, come back here. Hey guys. I'm going to do a read aloud about this short fairy tale called Billy Beg and the Dragon. I want you to listen closely to the read aloud. It's only 2 pages long, and I'm going to read it real quick. But I want you to answer some questions afterwards. So I'm going to have a PDF for you to download, and you can answer these 5 questions. Where and when does the fairy tale take place? What make-believe character, made-up creature is in the story? What character has special powers? What problem has to be solved? And what happened to Billy, who's the main character, and the princess in the end? Listen closely. Think about those questions. I'm going to read this as quickly as I can so that you guys can get on to your work and answer these questions. Billy Beg and the Dragon. Long ago, in a peaceful land, a young man named Billy Beg worked on a farm. Billy seemed very ordinary, but he had 2 magic tools that no one else knew about. One was a stick with special powers. The other was a belt that protected him from harm. One day, the farmer said, "Come to town with me, Billy. Today, Sir Fairweather, the bravest knight in the kingdom, will battle a dragon. If Sir Fairweather wins, the princess will marry him." "Well, no thanks," said Billy. "I think I'll have plenty to keep me busy." But when everyone else was gone, Billy picked up his magic stick and tied the magic belt around his waist. With the stick, he changed a shaggy goat into a fine horse and his ragged work clothes into a colorful suit, and then he rode to town. Now all the villagers were gathered in the town square, and on a high platform sat the king and the queen and their daughter. Sir Fairweather strode up and down in front of them, sword at the ready. Suddenly a huge shadow blocked out the sun. With a great hiss of flames and a flap of wings, the dragon swooped into view, and its scales shone like green diamonds, and its red eyes glittered with evil. Sir Fairweather took one look and leaped into the nearest well to hide. Now the dragon stalked up and down, breathing fire at the people who scrambled away. "Please," called the king. "There's no one willing to battle this dragon." Billy held up his magic stick, and it changed into a gleaming sword. "Over here, fireworm," he shouted, and the villagers gasped with admiration. Who was this new hero? The dragon blew fire at Billy, but the flames bounced off his sword and belt, and he disappeared. Billy galloped toward the dragon with his sword flashing in the sun. The battle raged fiercely. Billy's sword sending sparks off the dragon's scales, and the dragon's foul breath scorching the ground but never touching Billy or his horse. Then Billy turned his sword into a heavy cudgel, which is a kind of hammer, and he hit the dragon on its head and knocked it out cold. From the platform, the princess sprinkled water on the dragon. Immediately, the beast disappeared in a cloud of smoke, because swords can't kill sleeping dragons, but water will put their fire out forever. The townspeople shouted and cheered. In the confusion, Billy galloped away, but the princess grabbed his shoe as he rode past. Why did she do that? I don't know. When the farmer came home, Billy was in the pasture as usual. "You should have seen the fight, Billy," the farmer said. "Oh, I've had plenty to keep me busy," said Billy. Well, the next day, the princess announced that she would marry the hero whose shoe she had snatched. Young men and old, weak men and strong, handsome men and homely lined up to try on the shoe, but it fit no one. Billy walked to the castle wearing his ragged work clothes, and the crowd laughed at him. "This kid thinks he wants to marry the princess?" The palace guards came to throw Billy out. "Wait a minute," said the princess. "He's got a fine face despite the ragged clothes. Let's let him try on the shoe for size." Billy put the shoe on, and the onlookers gasped. It fit perfectly. "Will you marry me?" the princess asked. "If you'll marry me," Billy answered. For the rest of their days, Billy and the princess ruled the kingdom well. But because there was always a new dragon that came along every once in a while, they always had plenty to keep them busy. The end. Great little story. So, that's all I have for you today, guys. You're going to have 2 things to do today. One is to answer these questions. I'm going to put a PDF file that you can download and print. Do it in Notability, send it back to Schoology. And I'm going to have one little fairy tales crossword puzzle for you guys to do, kind of like the short one you did. It only has 5 words where you need to fill in the crossword puzzle with the definitions of fairy, heroine, hero, culture, and folk tale. I think you guys can do this. It should be an easy one. I want you to have fun with it. And if you have any questions or problems, let me or Miss Radman know. We're going to talk some more about fairy tales and start reading Cinderella tomorrow. Have a great day, guys.